When Lance retired, this appeared on the cover of Sports Illustrated. It's the first time ever that Sports Illustrated put an athlete on the cover of the magazine without their athletic attire, apparel, uniform. They'd never done something like this. And we all struggled. What do we do now? How do we build upon the success that this brand has given us, this broad reach? We made a strategic decision. We did not want to build infrastructure. We didn't want to set up offices all over the country and all over the world. Many organizations do that, and it's great, and it works for them. We didn't want to build that bureaucracy. So how could we take this concept of Livestrong, this yellow piece of silicon, and how could we make sure it was accessible to everyone and that our programs and services were accessible? So, you know, I get to stand up here and speak, and I get to travel a lot, and right or wrong, I get credit for a lot of things, but this is the woman that deserves a lot of the credit. This is what you would see if you were in Austin today. You would see the back of Brooke's head, and you would see her staring at her monitor. In 2005, at our Monday morning management meeting, a team of our employees came in, and they said, "We've got a problem." I said, "What's the problem?" They said, "Brooke's husband got transferred to Houston. 2 little kids, they've got to move to Houston." I said, "What's the problem?" The problem is we love Brooke. Brooke is an incredibly valuable asset to our organization, and we have to figure out a way to keep Brooke. I said, "Well, we don't want to open offices. We don't want to have people, commuting. What are we going to do?" We think that we should create a new position for Brooke where she can live in Houston, come to Austin, as needed. And I said, "Well, what's the position?" They said, "We would like to make her our online community evangelist." 2005. Never had a MySpace page. I didn't have a Facebook page. I was not a believer in social media at all. And here they are pitching me on an online community evangelist. So I'm thinking about the bottom line. We don't have the resources, just keep adding staff. Lance is retired. We didn't know what impact that would have on development and fundraising. If we could have 10 Brooke McMillans right now, we could be having such a more massive impact. She has single-handedly transformed the way that we operate in terms of using social media and being transparent with the millions of people who invest in our cause. I was the biggest skeptic. As things usually work out, Brooke moved to Houston for her husband's job. After a year and a half, that didn't work out. They're back in Austin. And she has sort of moved her way up through the organization, and she is now leading a team of people who manage the millions of people that follow us on Twitter and Facebook and all those things. But it was our team of people who believed so much in this concept of taking this yellow band and the next phase of it, taking it to social media. Some actually would say that the yellow wristband was the first form of social media. It gave people a way to interact with each other that they otherwise wouldn't have. You go to an airport and you see somebody wearing a yellow wristband, you'd see people talking, or you'd see people looking at each other. It was that first sort of way that people could connect around a cause or a mission. So let me just give you a few stories about how we're doing this and how it's changed our business. We're constantly in direct communication with our constituents. And I know all of you in this room are using social media in various ways as well. But anytime we have an issue, we go directly to our supporters. We go directly to cancer survivors. This is a question that we posed back in April, I guess. And what's so interesting about this, we had 4,000 cancer survivors respond to this survey within 48 hours. We now have Microsoft, Google, General Electric, and others coming to us to get that data. Every company who's working in the space of electronic health records and electronic medical records wants to understand what those 4,000 people want, what they need, what they're scared about, what they're worried about, privacy issues. And so it's allowed us to get real-time information in a very transparent and open way. And it's built more and more trust with our supporters. We did a Father's Day promotion where people on Facebook would post about their dad's experience with cancer, and it was just wildly successful. Again, giving people a way to participate. Cancer has always been seen, and many nonprofits have been seen as fighting something that I can't impact. I'm not a scientist. I can't go cure cancer. I can't go to a lab and solve the problem. Our goal is to give people the opportunity to participate in this process and be a part of changing the outcome. And this is a funny story. So many of you are familiar with Tony Hsieh and Zappos and their sort of business. But this was March of '09. And I got a tweet from Tony, who I didn't know. And he said, hey, I'm going to be in Austin. Can I come by and see your headquarters? I thought, sure. So he came by, and so what is that, 15 months later, Tony has become one of our biggest supporters. Zappos has become a great supporter on a number of fronts in the creative way that only they can do. And if you go to the Zappos website now, what you'll see in very subtle ways is that almost every single model on that Zappos website wears a yellow wristband. If they're modeling a handbag, if they're modeling shoes, if they're modeling just a very subtle way that they have been able to support us, all because of a connection made through Twitter. Most recently, Tony's new book came out 2 weeks ago, all about happiness and culture, which if you haven't gotten it, you should grab one. It's very good, very authentic. And so for his book launch party, it happened to coincide with my birthday. So he threw a big party in New York for his book launch that raised money for the foundation, and we were able to raise over $50,000 that night, which is wonderful. Again, all through a connection made on social media. Now, why does that matter for us? It gives us, again, a transparent and free way to communicate with people. I mean, when I started 15 years ago in the nonprofit space, it was all about newsletters, and it was about database. Who has the most people? And how do you communicate with them? By sending them a newsletter. Now we're communicating with people in real time, people who've requested to follow, requested to be a friend, requested the information, and it's free. So it's totally changed the nonprofit space. So what has this transformed us into? It's transformed us into this organization that can not only provide direct service to people and families with cancer, but also this army of people who are now a part of this mission. We don't call them members because it's not about our organization. It's about getting more and more people involved in the cause. It's about people going and fighting for their rights, fighting for the rights of cancer survivors. It's about communities all over the country. It's about kids having a lemonade stand. It's about people who want to give back because their lives have been personally impacted by this disease. We know this disease is going to impact 1 in 2 men and 1 in 3 women in their lifetime. Every single one of us. I mean, Jason asked you to raise your hands earlier, and everybody raised their hands. We've all been touched in some way. Since my own diagnosis, I've watched both my parents battle cancer. Luckily, they're both doing amazingly well. It's allowed us to leverage millions of people to get others involved. President Clinton and the Clinton Global Initiative will host this fall a session on cancer. They've never done that. It'll bring corporations, NGOs, and others together to figure out globally what we can do to fight this disease. Cancer is global. Yes, we're based in Austin, Texas. Yes, we have a small staff of 85, but we are now able to bring together the former president of Nigeria, the prime minister of Jordan, the head of the European Union. We're able to bring these people together and convince them that they need to use the resources and assets at their disposal towards the fight against cancer. There are 28 million people around the world today who are living with a history of cancer. 28 million cancer survivors. And that's our core audience. That's our focus. How can we make their lives better than they are today? For the first time ever, in 2010, cancer will become the #1 cause of death around the world. More people this year will die of cancer than AIDS, malaria, and tuberculosis combined. Think about that. And yet it's been around forever, and it has slowly and methodically become this #1 cause of death. The resources put against it are not commensurate with the burden that it causes. And that's one of our goals on the advocacy side. So this is a big year for us in terms of engaging the global community in the fight. So how do we do that with 85 people fighting the #1 cause of death around the world? Well, we do that by building this army, by using social media, and by amazing partnerships with companies like the ones you see on the screen and many others. The yellow wristband has now turned into a whole collection from Nike. that generates $10 million a year for our organization. Some of the other ones you see on the screen, partnership with Radio Shack and Oakley. Oakley is an amazing case study. Oakley sells 6 pairs of Livestrong sunglasses. Same glasses that they sell non-branded. Over here they sell the Livestrong ones and they charge $10 more. And they sell 5 times faster than the non-branded ones. People will pay a premium to know that they're a part of something larger than themselves. And I do want to just mention the partnership we have with American Century because it's relevant to all of you in the room. American Century Investments is a company out of Kansas City that an investment firm that does 401k planning and mutual funds, founded by Jim and Virginia Stowers. Jim and Virginia are both cancer survivors. A few years ago, as Jim was retiring from his day-to-day activities at the organization, he decided he would contribute 50% of his equity in the company to create a medical research institute in Kansas City. 50% of his equity was $2 billion. Jim and Virginia are the 3rd largest philanthropists in the United States. They came to us a few years ago and they said, we want to do something to help fight cancer using our expertise. And what we created was a portfolio of Livestrong branded funds. And these funds are socially responsible. There's no tobacco investments. There's no carcinogenic investments. These funds perform extremely well. They're rated at the highest level by Morningstar. And what this does is most nonprofits historically have gone to companies and said, we need resources, give us money, give us energy, give us time. What we try and do is say, how can we partner in a way that lets you leverage what you're the best at? So what does this mean? This means that companies can adopt the Livestrong funds as part of their 401k plan. Employees can opt to invest in the Livestrong funds at no extra cost to the company and at no extra cost to the employee. The foundation receives a royalty based on the amount of assets that are in the funds. The royalty comes from American Century. Does not come from any fees, does not come from the employer or the employee. Another way that people can feel like they're a part of the Livestrong grassroots movement without having to actually contribute dollars themselves. So again, innovative partnerships with all these companies and more. The other way we're able to do this is because we have the most passionate, committed team of people who come to work every day thinking they can change the world. The 2 things I always say about our staff: they are incredibly, incredibly naive. And they are incredibly, incredibly audacious. We are naive enough to think we are going to change the world. And we are audacious enough to try. And if we don't succeed, we will only have saved a few million lives and helped a few million more. If we don't succeed. So why are people so important to us? The nonprofit space has always been told, do more with less. Pay your people less. Don't spend money on office space. Don't spend money on anything. That is nonsense. I would argue that nonprofits in this country provide just as much value and benefit to society as the quote-unquote for-profit industry. In fact, we have the YMCA here. The largest, if not the largest, second largest nonprofit organization in the country. $4 billion organization, 2,600 branches all over the country. Every single one of us who's been to a YMCA has benefited from a nonprofit. Every single one of us who's ever called a social service organization has benefited. So without having to be an investor, without having to be a shareholder, everyone can benefit from the quote-unquote nonprofit society. So we decided we were going to renovate this old warehouse, and we were going to ask our employees, what do you want? What do you want in this environment? And they said overwhelmingly 2 things. We want natural light, and we want more meeting space. So we got rid of all offices. We're all in cubes. They're all the same size. They all look exactly the same. And we put in tons of windows into this facility. It's LEED Gold certified, and it has now become a gathering place in East Austin. For those of you who are familiar with Austin, traditionally underserved side of town. And it has been amazing in terms of building a community. What are some of the other things we did? We put in a gym. All the equipment was donated. That's the advantage we have as a nonprofit. We can get things donated. But we had donors who came in and said, I can't believe you're putting in a gym. And I said, for our social workers who day in and day out are answering calls from people who have just been diagnosed with cancer, dealing with the stress and the burden and the emotion of that, for them to be able to walk 10 yards, 15 yards and break a sweat and go back to work or take a shower or whatever, I mean, this is all about people. It's about building a community. We have no paid time off. Not only did it save us money, it saved us a half of one of our teammates' time who was in accounting, who was tracking all the paid time off. This is such an interesting psychological experiment because we thought, oh, everybody's going to love this. And there are actually people who say, I want to know, how much time do I have off? And what it's led to is it's led to, unfortunately, in some cases, people taking less time off than they would have. That said, overall, it's been a huge success. People are much more flexible with their schedules. People are taking long weekends. We know that everyone is passionate. We know that everyone's working way more than 40 hours a week. And if you're not getting your job done, we will let you know that. But it hasn't been a problem yet. We were just named recently 50 best nonprofits to work for, as well as one of the best places to work by Outside Magazine. So things that, again, traditionally nonprofits have not even been competitive in. They've not even been a part of the discussion. But the one thing that came up when we got all the anonymous feedback was this work-life balance with the PTO issue. So we're assessing that as we go forward. But we believe in creating an amazing environment with which to do our work. And at the end of the day, it comes back to building that community of people who really care. So authenticity, transparency, using social media, and building community. When I moved to Austin, Texas in January of 2001, I was the 4th employee at the foundation. Renee was the 3rd. Renee lost her father to cancer 2 years earlier. She was from Maine. She picked up and she moved to Austin. She decided, I want to work at the Lance Armstrong Foundation to honor my dad. 2 years ago, at 37, Renee was diagnosed with advanced breast cancer. First employee at the foundation to be diagnosed while working at the foundation. Never forget. I mean, you walk through the office and it was like, I mean, it was dramatic. This is a high energy place and people, no smiles. I mean, people were devastated. Renee is doing phenomenally well, having gone through a double mastectomy, chemotherapy, radiation, fertility treatments. She's young and single and wants to have a family. In her experience, having our team of 85 people watch a colleague, friend, coworker of theirs go through the experience that we aim to sort of help others through was really transformational. She's back to work. She's leading a lot of our corporate partnerships. She's got more energy than she ever has. That's like a half smile for her. Typically, it's ear to ear. But at the end of the day, we will only succeed in our mission because of people like Renee. Because of the 84 other colleagues that we have who have the same passion and the same belief, the same audacious belief that we are going to succeed. So I'll close by just telling you that I mentioned earlier, you know, I have these amazing parents. I mean, the best of the best. I'm so lucky. And they're both now cancer survivors. Watching them go through this disease was so much harder than what I personally had to go through. But when I was young, my parents always reminded my brother and I of one sort of lesson. It was the reason they moved to this planned city called Columbia, Maryland. And the lesson was the difference between a community and a crowd. And what they said was, in a crowd, people push and they shove and they elbow and they try to get ahead of one another. And in a community, people look around and they nod and they gesture and they smile and they wave and they realize when it's all said and done, no one will ever move forward unless we all move forward together. And that difference between a community and a crowd is what fuels our work. We are trying to build a community that is authentic, that is transparent, and that believes that we all want to be a part of something bigger than ourselves. And if we're successful, as I said, we will change the way the world fights cancer. We will save millions of lives, and we will positively impact millions more. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to take any questions you have. Sure. Sure.
There's 100 others. And how do you guys work together?
Sure. So the question was, how do you work together with other cancer organizations? There are actually, at last count, about 660 US-based organizations focused on cancer. So there are hundreds of them. Susan G. Komen being one that's just down the road from here. American Cancer Society being sort of the biggest name brand. I'll tell you two things. One, we work very closely with many of them. We actually work really closely with the American Cancer Society. Interesting story. American Cancer Society is a $1 billion a year organization. They raise $1 billion a year. We, in comparison, are very small. We raise $50 million a year. Last year, the American Cancer Society, their president and CEO, John Sefrin, who's a great guy and mentor of mine, came to me and asked me if Livestrong would take on a project that he didn't think they could handle or succeed at. And they invested in our organization to do that. That was a really telling moment. It was a time when I think we all sort of sat around and realized, you know what, we each have unique assets to bring here. And if we can go accomplish this and that helps the community, great. Unfortunately, I think there's not enough collaboration because there's competition for dollars. And that's one of the areas where we've been able to sort of stay a little bit removed from because of these great corporate partnerships. We haven't had to fight to compete for dollars. And unfortunately, that drives a lot of what's going on. But what I would say is of those 600 organizations, a lot of them are focused on research. And research is very important. But for us, it's not the best use of our money. I mean, the federal government's spending $6 billion this year on cancer research. Pharmaceutical industry is spending another $9 billion. So for us to invest 20, 30, 40 million, it's really a drop in the bucket. Now, if we can advocate and get other countries to spend billions on research, get states to change their policies and increase funding, that's sort of the better use. So we've sort of tried to pick our niches and not replicate or duplicate what others are doing. Jason.
I'm a fan of Lance Armstrong, but I think there's a bigger fan like you guys.
Well, that's nice. You're kind. Any other questions? Yeah.
You mentioned that, with Brooke's position and that you were a little bit skeptical about the whole social media space. What were you concerned about, and how did you sort of move past that?
That's a good question. Why was I skeptical of social media, and how did I move past it? It just was something that was I was so unfamiliar with. I mean, I just didn't use it personally, and so I didn't get it. I mean, I heard about it and I followed it, but I just didn't understand sort of the real value. And it was Brooke who, in October of 2008, came to my desk. She actually sits right on the other side of a little partition, and she said, "I want you to try this Twitter thing." I mean, I had never heard of Twitter. And I'm addicted to my BlackBerry, and so she's like, "I'm going to preload it on your BlackBerry. You can just do it from your BlackBerry. All you do is just say what you're doing." And I thought, this is so strange. What am I? I mean, who's going to read it? Who's going to, And so the funny story is, so like a week later, I'm at a meeting at Lance's house, and we're going over some stuff, and he looks at my BlackBerry and he sees this symbol or logo for Twitter. He's like, "What's that?" He's got to know what's going on. He's like, "What's that? What's Twitter? What's Twitter?" So then, of course, he wants to figure it out. So he wants to join, and so it was just trial and error. I mean, it was just the encouragement of her to say, "Look, people want to know. People who support us want to know what you're doing." And I thought that was really strange, and I still think it's really strange. But it almost became. I mean, we have a very competitive environment, and it almost sort of became competitive. Like, okay, well, I want to use this more. I want to figure out new ways to do it. I want to figure out how we can sort of innovate. And I'll never forget, we were in Australia in January of 2009. And the reason I always remember this, it was the day that President Obama was being inaugurated. And we're sitting there in the hotel room watching the inauguration. And Lance said to me, he said, at the time he had 24,000 followers. And he said, do you think between now and the Tour de France in July, I could get to 100,000? And we thought, well, that's a great goal. If we got to 100,000 people that were reaching, every day using Twitter, and this was only, this is 15 months ago, or 18, 17 months ago. And then, by the time the tour came around, he had 1 million followers, and now he's got 2.5 million. But it's allowed us to do things that we never thought possible. I mean, if we need 20 volunteers today in Des Moines, Iowa, we post on Twitter, we'll have 100 volunteers in Des Moines, Iowa. I mean, it's just amazing. So I was definitely a skeptic, and now, of course, I've told Brooke and our team that she works with, I've said, you guys got to find out what's next. How do we get ahead? How do we figure out the next best thing? And now I'm totally addicted. Anything else?
Great. Well, thank you
Thank
very
you.
much, Doug.
Thank you.